boost you by another 5%. Oh, oh.
Okay. I just started YouTube up. I want to see what happened. I cut out that delay that was in it because I found out that was causing a lot of the problems. YouTube. So that sounds good.
Okay.
Because I know a couple of our episodes, man, we were cut off in the middle of it and shit. It was because of that delay. Alright, so the YouTube is we're sounding good. Now I'm going to do Rumble.
Cool.
This one usually causes me problems where I have to refresh a few times, so I usually have to skip it and then come back to it later. There we go, it's kicking on. So I usually... Sounds good. Now I'll start the stream for X. And I'll post it too. I've been actually getting a lot of interest in my storytelling when I've been doing stuff on what is it, like pulp fiction,
Okay.
and people have really been getting into it. I was really surprised.
Cool.
I was doing
Cool.
I've been doing the history of it and stuff like that, so it's been...
I did see your invite earlier for tomorrow.
Oh yeah, the one with Sonya. That's going to be good.
Yeah.
I think
Do you
that's...
know what time?
She wants to do it at about 5 o'clock, so about this time tomorrow.
Okay.
And I think it's going to be good because I haven't interviewed her yet, you know.
What is the subject?
It's about Sonya, dude.
Okay.
That's all I got. It's about Sonya.
Okay.
You know, yeah, there's no telling what that topic's going to be about.
Yeah.
So, I mean, I'm just being honest. This is Sonya we're talking about. I love her to death, but it's like, even she said, you know, like, what's the topic going to be, because I might start out somewhere and end up somewhere else. I love her to death. The audio sound. So yeah, everything seems to be up and running and doing good, so we should be good to go. Got another 9 minutes, so if you want to grab something and get ready.
Well, yeah, I just made a coffee and now, so just gonna need some paracetamol. So ever since I got back, I had a bit of a slight headache.
Yeah. The only bad thing about using these cool freaking gaming things for the background on the stream is the fact that it uses the media source on the OBS, so I can't put like my music on and walk away from the computer and stuff. But tonight's gonna be good. That's the reason why I got the Pong game on there, is because we're gonna be talking about Pong and stuff like that.
Well, it's an internet game then. Okay.
Yeah, so I've got everything up and running. But yeah, that Pulp Fiction, man, I'm going over Conan, the story behind Conan, and then Cool of Atlantis. Yeah. Have you ever heard of Cool of Atlantis?
Means a bell, but nothing specific.
It was the Robert Howard's first go at trying to create a character like Conan the Barbarian, which he later developed into Conan. But the original story was about Cool, and he was from Atlantis, and it eventually he was able to make the story evolve to where he came up with Conan the Barbarian, and I went over all that stuff last night, and then like this next one I'm gonna go over H.P. Lovecraft.
Not overly. But any Lovecraftian material.
Yeah, I know a lot of
I
people.
only really know Lovecraft from some of the sort of YouTube stuff and the sort of Fallout sort of franchise sort of connection.
Have you ever watched a movie called Dagon?
No, I don't think so.
Or you remember Animator, Reanimator,
Huh?
the
Animator?
Reanimator? It came out back in like the 80s and 90s.
It's so very American sort of thing.
Oh no, this is everywhere, dude. Like Reanimator was about a scientist that freaking was able to use science to reanimate living tissues.
Or Frankenstein sort of thing.
Yeah,
Okay.
it was pretty. It was a pretty interesting story too. Like he had a whole bunch of cool stuff like that.
No, I'm not familiar with that.
It's like I'm gonna start on that one. This next one, it should be pretty good. Whenever I get it set up, hopefully I can get people interested in it. Cause like H.P. Lovecraft did something back in his day that nobody did, and they do it now. It's not a big deal, but back then it was. Just where he would write a story, and he would encourage people to take his story and turn it into their own. You know what I mean?
Okay. Yeah.
And they would do this stuff back and forth, and I always thought that was cool that he did that. That was before he was before he was doing it back before its own time, you know.
Okay.
So today everybody does that shit, but that wasn't something that all the writers did back in those days. And he had the dreaded Necronomicon. Have you ever heard of the dreaded Necronomicon?
Yeah. Isn't it meant to be a book with the covers made out of human's flesh or something?
Mm-hmm.
With
Yes.
the sort of Pandora's box type thing.
Yeah. It was the dreaded and wretched Necronomicon. That's why I fell in love with Ash, dude. I love the frickin' Ash in the Army of Darkness series.
Okay.
I even watched the TV series because of it.
Again, not familiar with it. Yeah. No.
I don't want to freak you out. I've already made it to where a lot of people don't like me because of that kind of topic. I'm like Mr. Evil now, you know.
Yeah. Just don't say Satan again.
Yeah. Well, I mean, everybody wants me to say Satan now because it's like for some reason they connect me to Satan. Maybe it's because my gamer name is Infamous. I don't know. But
I can see. I'm just reading your write-up for this episode, and I can see a few issues there.
well, you need to discuss them. Wait till I hit record before you discuss them, though.
Yeah.
'cause-
Well, yeah, I can see some issues.
See, this is going to be a good episode. This is what I was talking about. Like we're going to have actual adult conversations about gaming, not talking about like the medal systems or the reward systems for playing Sonic the Hedgehog. You know, it's just there's so much history in gaming that people are completely unaware of.
Mm.
So, like all the stuff I brought up tonight, I think that was the cool stuff because this is stuff that also reaches into like the old conspiracy theories behind gaming too. If you remember, she wants to do it.
Such as?
Well, war games for one thing. Have you ever?
Okay.
You know that wasn't just a movie, man. There were freaking people that were talking about that for the longest time. And like when you were younger, do you remember all the people who got arrested because they hacked into military freaking information and stuff through the internet?
Not in the UK again. the internet is a bit of a confusing term when you go back to the 80s.
Like people were getting arrested for hacking into military information through gaming. You know what I mean? It would start out where they got on these gaming networks, and then they would freaking be able to tap into stuff that was freaking government information and shit.
Yeah, see, you're talking about the bulletin board systems rather than the internet.
Well, that was all one thing. See,
The ARPANET, the BBS ARPANET, telex systems, they're all different sort of different things.
yeah, and they were like the beginnings to freaking what we call the internet. You know what I mean? Like these were beginnings, like to what we call the internet today.
Again, do not conflate the internet with the web.
Well, the web is not really important.
Again, they are two different,
Yeah.
two different principles.
I know you got this like freedom of the internet mentality going on where I know the truth, you know, where the internet was invented by the military, and then the web came along and created it a free society for all people. Yay for the web.
Not quite.
I should probably hit record here before long. We're starting good conversations.
Yeah. It reminds me of like something I had in Canary's chat about 2 years ago, actually. Hope you find that.
Here, let me do my countdown and I'll start everything up, and then you can do your thing and I'll do the introduction and stuff. So 3, 2, 1, now. Hello everybody and welcome back to another episode of Gaming with Infamous. Today I am back with Mark Edworthy, and we are going to start off with another topic. This is something that I've been wanting to do actually for a while, because me and Mark keeps having these crazy conversations about the history of gaming and the internet. So I was looking around, and I tried to come up with some of the best information I could come up with, and so far from what we've been having a conversation about before the stream started, or the show started, I think I'd done a pretty good job, because he's come up with some good stuff to have talk about too. So tonight what we're going to do is we're going to start a conversation that's going to be about the genesis of gaming. What do you think about that, Mark? That was pretty cool, wasn't it? How I called it the genesis of gaming.
The
Genesis. You see, but this is going to be going down a road, and we're going to have more episodes on this too, by the way, because like we were just previously talking about cloud gaming, and a lot of this stuff does kind of intertwine with one another. To really get a full story of all this stuff, you have to go back to the beginning, and that's where I wanted to start out with the genesis of gaming. So tonight we are going to talk about the history of gaming and where it all came from and the things that were involved. I've came up with some notes that I did post on Discord and on Skype. If anybody's interested in checking them out later on, they have wiki links for a lot of the stuff that I brought up. But also Mark pointed out some things too that I think we should discuss. And with that being said, I'm gonna introduce Mark. This is Mark Edworthy, and if you want to say hi, Mark, say Mark.
Hi. Hi, people.
So today what I want to do, like I said, is start out with the genesis of gaming. Now what I want to talk about is the arcade beginnings in early consoles back in the 1970s. The story of gaming begins in arcades. where titles like Pong started out in 1972. Now, I do have the links for that, like I said, on Discord and Skype if anybody wants to check them out. Now, you had Pong and you had Space Invaders, which was in 1978. Now, these were coin-operated machines, and they laid the foundation for gaming. Okay, and even today, they consider them as a cultural phenomenon. What do they call that freaking place? It's here in the United States where they freaking are supposed to. You can help me out on this, Mark. It's the one where they put historical stuff into it.
Museum?
No, it's the national thing. I keep forgetting the name of it.
Smithsonian?
The Smithsonian, yes.
Okay.
Now, a lot of people don't know that, but like it's actually is it's considered a freaking phenomenon behind, you know what I mean? So it actually made it to the point where they freaking, I believe it was Pong that they actually inducted into the Smithsonian because of how significant it was to the gaming world, basically. And I can double check on that, but I'm pretty sure it was Pong to be fair.
Oh, sounds right, yeah.
And the whole thing with Pong too that I found that was really, really interesting is the story that went behind it. Now, I had pulled up my notes and stuff about it. Space Invaders, you know, that was a fun game. Don't get me wrong, okay? But when it comes to games and the stories that go behind it, you have to start out with Pong first because the conversation that me and Mark and sometimes Tan High Train gets caught up in it, where we talk about a lot of the controversial stuff that took place when it comes to like the gaming wars back then and what was really happening behind the scenes, and that's kind of where we're going to go tonight. Like I said, it was a cultural phenomenon, and around the same time that Pong came out, oh, excuse me, I burped. Magnavox, I believe it was in 1972, came out with Magnavox Odyssey. Now this was the world's first home console, and for me, this is just my take on it, but I think that was where it was the decline of what we would eventually have had when it come to internet gaming, like, because there were people who were actually working on trying to create internet gaming during that time period, but it was slowed down because of the creation of console gamings. This is the beginning of it, because, and I do say the beginning because later on they did come out with freaking other consoles that really just, it was the end to the whole idea of having internet gaming sooner than what they had it. So before we get started deeper into this, what's your take on Magnavox Odyssey, Mark?
I'm just looking through the Wikipedia page now, and I haven't seen this device in many years, and I've never actually seen one in flesh, so to speak. Again, I have not seen this machine in many years.
No, I've never even seen that before, to be honest with you.
I've seen things like images of it on
now the thing that
magazines and stuff, but yeah.
The thing that got me about it was that I remembered a long time ago when I was younger, there was movies that came out like war games, okay, and there was always this kind of like gaming conspiracy theory that was out about the military using games for experimentation and stuff like that, you know. And it wasn't until later that I started learning about Magnavox Odyssey and the people who were involved with it. Now, the thing that I actually learned, and I like I said, I pulled it up into the links that I posted. But I learned about companies like Sanders Associates, and I do have a Wikipedia on there. Now, they were involved with the Pong, which came out. I believe the guy's name was Alan Alcorn. He was an American engineer and computer scientist. Now he was known for creating Pong. He was one of the first video game engineers who came out with it, and he came out with it in 2009. Now, he was actually chosen by IGN as one of the top game creators of all time, just so people know, you know what I mean? And the reason why I bring him up was because after that, he ended up getting in trouble, or not him necessarily, but Atari ended up getting in trouble with Magnavox Odyssey, who came out with their version of Pong, and I believe the game was actually called Ping Pong or some crazy shit like that.
Yeah, I think that's after the Korean that's game with bats, isn't it?
Yeah, and what happened was this was the beginning of the gaming wars, in my opinion. That's the term that I like to coin it, is the gaming wars, where Magnavox went head to head against Atari because of the game Pong. Now,
What year?
this was supposed to be in 1972, I believe.
Okay.
Wait, hold up.
So really, the first day of first software intellectual property legal fight.
Yeah, it was back in 1972 when all of this happened. I believe yeah, it's 1972 when Pong first came out. Now these two games ended up having a rivalry over Pong, and I remember that Magnavox ended up suing them over the intellectual rights, I guess is what you'd call it. And
intellectual property.
and the game, or Magnavox's hardware, it was designed by a small team that was led by Sanders Associates. Now, this is what led me down the rabbit hole when it comes to what I was talking about before with War Games. If you guys are old enough to remember that movie, the Sanders and Associates was a defense contractor in Nashua, New Hampshire, and they started out in the United States. They started out in 1951 until it was finally sold in 1986. So that's the thing about them. They've been around a lot longer than what the video games were. You know what I mean? So hold on a minute. I have got to hold on a minute. I'll be right back. Okay.
something I was just reading about was the that Odyssey was the people that created the first ever light gun,
Mm-hmm.
uh, rifle, which became famous when Nintendo created one in the 80s,
Yep.
which was based on the original 1970s model.
And if you remember too, it came with the original gaming console too, because
Yeah, Duck Hunt,
yep, Duck Hunt.
which most people would recognise. Most people of our generation would recognise, at least.
Mm-hmm. That was
Mm.
something that really stuck out to me too on that one. Um, Now with me, what really sent me down the avenue was when it came to Sanders and Associates. Now Sanders Associates, like I said, it was in the it started out in 1951 and it was sold in 1986. Um, it's now part of the BAE Systems Electronics and Integrated Solutions. Now, BAE Systems comes from England. You're part of the their neck of the
The
woods.
UK, yeah, UK defence contractor.
It concentrates on developing and manufacturing electronic systems, notably aircraft self-protection systems and tactical surveillance and intelligence systems. And I remember I was actually doing research on some of this in some of my weirder, stranger, content that I have, where it starts talking about like air-to-ground missiles. Like
Mm. Yeah.
they've gotten to the point now to where they can actually find targets through satellite and be able to target them from satellites in outer space, and they'd have ground missiles that would fire off of vehicles if they had them on vehicles or just stationary ones, and they could hit the target. Um,
I'm not sure about specialised satellites, but I believe there's just standard GPS.
well, today, yeah. I
So
mean,
8 GPS in the UK and whatever the equivalent is in the US, I can't remember. Top of
well,
my head.
well, today, yeah, it's no big deal. You know what I mean?
Mm.
But like, what I'm getting at is all of that started because of stuff like this. You know what I'm saying? These people were the ones who were involved in all of that, and I find that that's pretty interesting when it comes to all of it. Um, Now, it also, like with the BAE systems, the BAE Systems Inc. is the Northern America subsidiary for the
Mm.
British Global Defense Contractors, BAE Systems PLC. So you got a subsidiary company here in the United States, or in the North American areas, which is most likely in Canada too, as
Mm.
as well as here in the United States, and they're also connected to England.
Would be all related to all Five Eye countries.
Mm.
So, most of Europe as well, for France especially.
And for me, it just kind of goes back to like my memories of back then. I remember, and it wasn't just uh, television either. It was news and media, but on TV they even talked about it where kids were getting arrested for hacking into government information. You know what I mean? And they were freaking being arrested by freaking the United States. Here in the United States, they were being arrested, and some of them ended up getting their rights to be on computers taken away from them. You know what I mean?
What, in the 70s and the 80s?
Yes. And
Okay.
it was a big deal back then. And they were hunting them down with military forces and busting into doors and shit. You know.
I'm sure it wasn't, a lot of it was just a sort of propaganda witch hunt type job.
I think that it's odd that became such a popular topic. If you really stop
Oh
and
yeah,
think.
that's what I mean. This was just a sort of scare tactic, sort of a lot of how many convictions were there compared to the rest.
Well, with me, I've never actually looked up how many convictions there were. You know what I
Uh,
mean? But
I mean, anybody can get arrested, but if you haven't done the crime, you can get convicted.
well, I knew that it was actually a big topic all the way up until like the late '80s. It kind of faded away in the '90s.
Okay, yeah, I'm just wondering how much of it is sort of old wives' tales, sort of scaremongering sort of things.
Well, when you stop and think about it, it also implies that freaking the government had their hands in a lot of information that was there, and that people were actually able to tap into government information. So the first question on my mind is, why is there freaking government information available to people publicly?
You're making an assumption that they did tap into that information. Like I said, just because there's arrest doesn't mean that people have done those illicit crimes.
Hold on, what was you saying? You kind of like blurred out there for a second.
Um, yeah, I'm just saying. Um, I lost my track of thoughts. Yeah, I was sure there was a lot of stories of people getting arrested. If there isn't any convictions, and there was no crime.
Well, I mean, I could.
So I'm just saying how much of this is actual factual, and how much of this is just sort of media hype, scare stories of the time.
Now, during 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 the 1970s and 1980s, that would be the big question to find out, because it's like I said, I mean, it actually became a big topic. This, like today, everybody's so used to having the internet they don't even think about it. You know what I mean? And you can't even talk to younger people about this because they don't really remember stuff like this. You know what I'm saying? Like, it's not even a part of their thought process, to be honest. But like the older generation, I mean, they remember this stuff. It was something here in the United States that was actually a big deal. And they I don't know if you've ever watched like shows like The Great American Hero, you know what I mean, and stuff like that. Do you remember that movie?
No.
Now, they actually they actually had a show on there, an episode I remember, where it was about a kid who was hacking into like bank accounts and stealing money out of the bank. You know what I mean? And they always tried to connect that somehow to him being a gamer. You know what I mean? Then you,
Yeah. So yeah, it reminds me of the uh, Hi- Hillary Clinton did something similar a couple of years ago, didn't she? She conflated gaming. She conflated things like Grand Theft Auto with actual real murders and real crimes.
no, what I found out just now was like in the 70s, a lot of the hacking incidents on early hackers was mostly academic institutes and research.
Yeah. Well, if we're talking about the so-called internet at the time, you were looking at either telex machines, which not not very practical, not very common in the US, or BBS systems, or as far as universities concerned, colleges concerned, and the US military, that'd be ARPANET.
Right. Now, they said that there was little to no legal consequences for their actions, and that was mostly because law enforcement wasn't well equipped to handle or even identify computer-related crimes. So it led to like minimal arrests, you know.
Yeah, but there are still things like sedition crimes or sedition laws.
Well, I mean, even identifying, the related crimes, they had a hard
Okay.
time to even identifying it. So, like, a person could go out and actually hack into a bank account and steal money, and there was little chance that they would get busted for it. You know what I mean?
Still theft, technically.
If you could figure out who did it.
If I was a copper, if I was a police officer, at that time I would consider it as electronic theft. So it would still be theft.
Now, I do have names of some of the people who were arrested, the notable ones. It says that, when personal computers started coming out, and then the proliferation of networks, hacking became more widespread. And that's when law enforcement began to take notice. And
I had a argument with somebody some time ago, and I do not like the term hacking, because hacking just means modification of software or hardware. So if I, let's say, stick a new battery in this phone, that's technically hacking.
you're a hacker. You hacker. Mark's a hacker.
If I don't know,
Well, you're lucky.
replace a flint in this lighter, well, that'd be hacking.
Well, you're lucky that
Right.
you're not freaking saying that shit in the 1970s, buddy. They'd have freaking stormed your house and taken you to freaking jail, man. Took away your rights to be on a computer.
True definition of hacking is just a modification of a device.
Hmm. Now, Kevin
So
Mitnick.
if you okay, that rings a bell.
Kevin Mitnick in 1981. He was one of the most famous hackers. He was first arrested in 1981 for stealing computer manuals. His later exploits would make him a central figure in discussions about cybersecurity. So yeah, this would have definitely something to do with you, because you're big on the whole copyright or the terms of services and stuff.
But stealing in manuals is still technically, only legally speaking, theft.
Well, I mean, that's what they said. He was a famous hacker. His first one, it was just stealing computer manuals. That's all he wanted.
Okay, that's not hacking in your definition of hacking. That's theft.
That
Nothing
was
more, nothing less.
that was in 1981.
Right.
Back when hacking was a word. It wasn't just, this trendy thing that you read on Wikipedia that said frickin' it was just altering frickin' something to another thing. Like now on
Yeah, your definition of hacking comes from mainstream media
Mhm.
rather than a much more academic usage of that term.
Okay, now have you ever heard of the 414 case?
Potentially, it rings a bell.
It was in 1983. Now this was a group of teenage hackers from Milwaukee. They were known as the 414s, and they broke into several high-profile computer systems, including Los Alamos National Laboratory. Their actions led to a congressional hearing on hacking and some arrests.
Okay.
Does that sound familiar to you? St. Alamos.
Rings a bell.
Okay, now Legion of Doom and Masters of Deception. Does that sound familiar? Dude,
Sounds like sounds like one of the sort of early 90s sort of cracking software duplication sort of groups.
I mean, dude, you're the one with like a computer background. You should know this shit. I mean, seriously, dude, what's wrong with you? It's like, dude, like Legion of Doom. You know what I mean? I'm sitting around working on computer software. I think if I hear the name Legion of Doom, it's gonna stick in my brain, and I'm gonna remember.
You remember that phase back in the early 90s and late 80s where you had all these small groups come up, and you had these software organizations or developers,
Mm-hmm.
development houses producing software with sort of copy protection methods in the software.
Mm-hmm.
And you had these number of groups that were duplicating the games and then using extra code to remove the security functionality or the hacking. Yeah, reminds me of that sort of thing.
That's probably what it is, man. I mean, when you stop and think about it. Well, I can tell you that these were two prominent hacker groups, okay? And they were involved in various activities back in the 1980s. They said that several members were arrested during like raids, and this is where they started raiding freaking houses and stealing people's shit off their computers and making it to where they couldn't be on the computers anymore for a certain amount of years. They were busting the masters of deception, the Legion of Doom.
Was that technically what you were terming as hacking, or was that just issues of duplication of software and reselling of software?
Well, see, what it was is that they weren't stealing; they were just altering.
But technically, at the time, legally speaking, it wasn't stealing.
They were,
because stealing is the removal of property from the owner, and they were duplicating, not removing the property.
So what happened?
This is where I don't know if you remember the Federation of Anti-Software Theft.
Mm-hmm.
That organisation that is still around. But in the 80s, they were very popular. They were US UK joint venture group, and at the time, the reselling duplication of software or intellectual property was never considered, legally speaking, to be theft.
Mm-hmm.
But obviously, the Federation of Anti-Software Theft treated it as theft. And then I've got an entire post on this actually on mine, so dig it out and say. It was amusing because they were claiming that people could report these organizations for stealing software when there was no actual theft, no stealing actually happening.
Now, have you ever heard of the Computer Fraud and Abuse Act? The CFA?
The what?
Computer Fraud and Abuse Act?
That's a US thing. Yeah, I'm familiar.
No, it was in 1986, and that was introduced to address the rising computer crimes. And it was what marked the beginning of like systematic tracking and prosecution of hacking cases. Now, when that went into effect, they still weren't able to be able to properly prosecute anybody for hacking or for, modifying things like you said. I like how you said it because you're a lot smarter and say it a lot better. But altering things, but it still wasn't able to do what they wanted it to do. Because even today, it's hard for them to determine exactly how many people were arrested and prosecuted for it. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So,
Again, arrest is one thing. Prosecution is a completely different thing.
they
I
have
mean,
they have
every, yeah.
they have incomplete records even. You know what I mean? Like they can't even tell you like going to the records. This is how many people that were prosecuted for hacking because they don't have the information. You know,
Which is weird because all prosecution should be publicly available.
well, that's where we
And that's,
that's where we
and so it's a severe national security issue.
yeah. See, we're going back to the original conversation of what I was talking about. You know, you had Magnavox Odyssey, you had the BAE, and this all started out with Pong. You know, and this started out with Pong. That was actually a part of government research before that. That it was involving the universities and the colleges, and this goes all the way back to the 1950s. You know, so I mean, it kind of makes you think like they don't even have complete records to talk about cybersecurity law enforcement back then. Now they did say that they estimated it to be in the dozens to low hundreds worldwide.
Okay.
So,
Okay.
and they said that the majority of it occurred in the 80s as hacking activities and awareness increased, which I think that was probably more likely that they created systems that could do a better job of tracking hackers. You know what I mean? It was probably happening even more back in the 70s, but then they got better at tracking and prosecuting people who did it in the 80s. Because, I mean, you think about it,
I think a much more it's a word for what you describe, and to use a more modern word would be fracking or freaking.
freaking.
Fracking. Yeah.
Fr-
Phraking.
Okay, so we'll start using the word fracking.
Yeah, well, then hacking, because hacking has got a much more academic meaning. Hacking, again, if you want to stick a extra light on your car, that's just technically a form of hacking.
Yeah, so
If you want, well,
we would call it fracking or
fracking,
facking.
yeah, with ph.
PH.
Yeah.
So that sounds good. I'll try to remember that, but for some reason in my head the word hacking just seems to stay there. You know what I mean? Like I can remember that, but if I remember to say facking,
I mean, you could make the argument that hacking is all related to the so-called right to repair movement that we're seeing at the moment. Lewis Wasserman and so forth, being able to repair, modify, and use the devices that you own for your own purpose.
that's cool. Now, with it, the whole thing with the BAE thing, you know, I find that it's interesting that they had a subsidiary group here in North America. I guess that you could call it a subsidiary. Yeah, and then they had another one in England, you know, and that these people were actually developing missile systems and shit like that, and aeronautics and stuff. Now, the most interesting thing about these people is the fact that they ended up acquiring a lot of powerful freaking companies. Like they now have Lockheed. They own that, and they also own. They acquired Boeing. They're commercial electronics.
Do they own it, or are they just part share on all those?
No, I know they acquired Boeing Commercial Electronics.
Okay.
No, that was for $66 million, and that would be 36 million euros. Um,
At the present, at the current.
yeah, and what's interesting to me is they own both Lockheed and they own Boeing Commercial Electronics. Now these were the players, like I said, that came out with Magnavox Odyssey, and that was the beginning of the gaming consoles. And this is just over, Pong, you know, that's how much I was talking about like that, and it really sticks out to me whenever I stop and think about it, like the shows that came out concerning war games and stuff like that.
Mm.
Because I do remember it. It was really pushed a lot in the mainstream during those time periods, and like you wouldn't get this kind of conversation from people who were even in their 30s, you know what I mean? Because they were playing games like freaking, like Rapid. He plays freaking the Adventures of Zelda, you know what I mean? And a lot of them were made back in like the 90s, you know.
Yeah,
So
we're talking more about the 8-bit era.
yeah.
Yeah.
And like they wouldn't even know about this kind of stuff.
These, but they are the 16-bit generation.
Yeah, yeah. So it's pretty interesting when I sit there and I think about it. Now even though that kind of technology is rudimentary, for today's standards. You got to realize that these early systems, they introduced millions to the idea of interactive entertainment. All right. Now the thing is, though, that the industry faced a significant limitation, which was isolation. Now players couldn't only they could only compete against nearby opponents or the computer itself. They couldn't like go worldwide when it came to these console games.
Again, we're looking at systems like BBSs, bulletin board systems, and like telex systems, where you could, in theory, compete with people
Well,
worldwide or remotely.
now at this stage, though, we're talking about like Magnavox. We're talking about Midway
Okay,
games.
so, but
Calm down. You're breaking up.
but in the UK, we've got systems like Prestel. France has had a system similar to Prestel. US never really got into the entire telex concepts, but bulletin board systems.
Yeah, and see that's what I was wanting to get into next, was because like here we're talking about basically Atari, we're talking about Magnavox, and then all of a sudden you had the rise of the internet gaming. You know what I mean? And
Well, I'm
and
not sure you can call it the internet per se, but
well, we'll hold off on that one and talk about the internet versus the web, because I know you want to talk about that. That's definitely going to happen.
sorry when I said telex, I meant telescript.
Mm-hmm.
So,
No,
no,
this with the internet gaming, it has academic roots, and that goes between the 1970s to the 1980s. The earliest form of internet gaming emerged not from commercial enterprises, but from academia. Networks like ARPANET allowed researchers to connect computers across institutions. Now, ARPANET is what gets things a little bit more interesting, because, like, I know you like to talk about how cool the web is and stuff like that, but this predates the web. This is the beginning of every.
Well, you could argue it's the precursor to the internet.
Hmm. And
Uh,
and they were using ARPANET through educational systems with these games as research, and
um,
that
it's the usage of TCP/IP.
right.
So, where the internet is based on TCP/IP, UDP, but yeah, ARPANET sort of created the concept of TCP/IP.
It was the first wide area packet switch network
Yeah,
with
yeah.
it distributed control, and one of the first compiler networks to implement the TCP/IP protocol suite. So it was one of the first ones to implement the TCP/IP. Now this is like the beginning, you know what I mean? Like, where it all started. This is before the debate between what is the internet or what is, the web. So we're talking straight up internet here, you know what I mean? And ARPANET was where the academic research into gaming was taking place. Um, Now, they call ARPANET the Advanced Research Project Agency. Okay. Now that was changed to the infamous DARPA. Okay, in the United States Department of Defense. So they were taking these games and they were allowing college students to play these games, these academics. And DARPA was freaking the ones that freaking started that stuff. They're the ones that set it up to where they could connect TCP and IP protocols and allow students to.
Not sure if it was DARPA per se, because there was a lot of universities that were, US colleges and universities that were doing sort of independent projects anyway.
And this is where we have to come to what you were talking about before the show. With we were talking and you said MIT, right? You had some some comments.
MIT was well known for MIT is well known for sort of organizing and creating call it standards. Yeah, creating standards, early standards.
Now, the thing that I've been learning about ARPANET and DARPA is that they've actually changed their names throughout the years. Like at one point they were ARPANET, then they switched to DARPA, and then they went back to ARPA, and then they switched back to
it's
DARPA.
called ARPANET itself. It's just a technological. It's just a name for a subset of technologies rather than an organization per se.
And that they actually did have a change in names throughout the time that it was. I believe it was ARPA. That it was first. The actual first name of the organization was, but I can probably pull that up and find out here in a minute. But that was basically what was taking place. They were switching names back and forth, and they did it at different time periods. I know in the 90s they switched back to DARPA, but they were actually switching their names over from DARPA to ARPA or some shit like that. So now among their experiments were multi-user dungeons, the MUDs. Do you remember MUDs?
I've played on several EBS-based MUDs.
No, they had text-based games where players navigated virtual environments and fought enemies and interacted with others. Now this is where we come up where we're going to talk a little bit about MIT. which you brought up, and they had games like titles like Colossal Cave Adventure, which was in 1976, and they were the precursors to modern role-playing games, RPGs.
I would argue with Colossus Caves because if I remember rightly, Colossus Caves is only a single player adventure, and it's what we would call, well, it's what I would call a text-based adventure, but what would be more commonly called these days as interactive fiction, which is the sort of earlier sort of precursor to the point-and-click adventures. In the 80s, I played quite a few text-based adventures. Two predominant ones. Being based on The Hitchhiker's Guide, Douglas Adams' Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy, and another extremely good was what was it? Melbourne Houses, The Hobbit, which is based on the Tolkien
Yep.
book.
Now, whenever I think of this game, what it reminds me too of is, I don't know if you remember it or not, but like, or I don't know if you even participated in it, but back whenever cell phones first came out, you could actually play math games where it would text you the adventure, and you had to press 1, 2, or 3 for whatever action you wanted. And sometimes,
Well, yeah.
yeah, and so,
Do you remember the old sort of book-based interactive adventures? You know, if you have a book, it will give you a description of, let's say you're in a dark room, there's a door to the north, there's a door to the south. Go to page 5 to go to
yeah,
north, go to page 6 to go to south.
right, exactly. And that's what it kind of reminds me of. And then like with the phone thing that I was talking about there too, is like you could get freaking really technical about it. I even remember some of the games that I've played now where you can go in, and you couldn't do it back during the time with the phones, but like here in these later ones, I used to get into strategy games where you could actually go into like Google Docs and create a freaking a spreadsheet and use math, you
Yeah.
know, to determine how many people you're going to have to defend against this amount of people, and they had stats on how strong these
Okay.
characters were. You
Yeah,
know,
that's more RPG sort of thing. But I was thinking more of the adventure games. And one very famous franchise of adventure games was Infocom's Sulk,
yeah.
if you're aware of that, which was extremely famous and is still a bit of a cult. Got a bit of a cult following.
Mm-hmm. Now, like Colossal Cave Adventure, I've never had the chance to play that one, but
Okay.
whenever I was checking it out and everything, that's exactly what it reminded me of. And then like now that you mentioned like the books, the old books where you had the multiple direction thing, where you could like, if you wanted to do this, go to page 5 or something like that.
Mm.
You know, that kind of reminds me of some of the newer stuff they're coming out with now too on the internet. Like a lot of people that I network with on Home Away from YouTube, they've got these adventure games where you go in and it gives you a storyline. There's no fighting or anything like that, but then they give you a multiple choice on which direction you want to go with like each character in the game. You know.
Yeah. What was it? Only a couple of weeks ago, we were talking about the Monkey Island franchise.
Yeah.
The LucasArts Monkey Island franchise, and yeah, especially in the early 90s, adventure games had a sort of renaissance. All these point-and-click adventure games. I remember playing many different types of adventure games, Syria and LucasArts adventure games on Amiga.
Oh yeah.
Weirdly enough, that sort of range of games sort of be died out during the late 90s, early 2000s, and we are only starting to see a resurgence of that sort of type
Yeah.
games now.
It's just now popping right back up.
Mm, mm,
Now the thing that gets me is like all of this actually started through DARPA. You know what I mean? And that's something that really stood out to me whenever I was checking it out. These are kind of like little gold nuggets. You know what I mean? And
mm.
people really don't have an understanding that like all of this technology that they've got today was actually started because of agencies like DARPA who were,
I'm not sure the technology, at least the principles of these games
well, the
should
evolution.
do themselves.
You know,
Yeah.
they started it and then it evolved into something bigger. You know, and
Mm.
this is one of the reasons why a lot of people have conspiracy theories when it comes to video games is because of where it actually started out. You know what I mean? Like these kind of games didn't start out because somebody had a fun idea or anything like that. They were intentional experimentations that were set up with these organizations through the college systems where students would go in and play these games and they were being monitored. You know?
Mm, not sure if a lot of them were being monitored, but a lot of these things start out at sort of university. Young scientists, young computer scientists, or what would become computer scientists, or young programmers, just playing around and experimenting and come up with ideas.
Well,
Really,
even like let's go back to Pong. Okay, now Pong
okay.
was released to the public. Okay, now you had Pong,
Mm.
which was for fun, and everybody had fun on it. But before that, it was actually being used by the government so that they could test responses.
Yeah.
They could test the response time responses of people whenever they played the game and how long it took them to make a decision. You know.
Looking at it from my point of view, in the 80s in the UK, um, we the UK government at the time did something fairly unique. They teamed up with companies such as Acorn Computers and also with the BBC and created a entire sort of early computer educational um, framework that was pushed out towards all schools. Hence why BBC computers was used throughout the 80s, throughout all early 90s, throughout all state schools in the UK. And this sort of computer literacy thing created
Hold on a minute.
people of my age, our age, went on from this sort of very fundamental educational framework pushed by the UK government and became programmers in their own right and released a lot of titles that we recognise now.
So you're saying that you were brainwashed because of the educational system to become programmers?
Arguably.
I was like, I'm sitting there listening to you. I'm like, dude, you're just like explaining brainwash technology right there.
Well, um, the US was extremely late to the game on this, and it was much more corporate led, especially by companies like Apple and IBM. But in the UK, we started back in I think 1980 with this sort of program, and it was much more sort of led by the Department of Education
Yeah.
rather than a corporation per se.
And see, that's the weird part about it too, because like these aren't like games that are nefarious or anything of that nature. Like Colossal Cave Adventure was just like an adventure going through a cave where you get
Yeah,
treasure. You
yeah,
know.
and it's text-based adventure. Yeah, you type in "Go North," pick up stones,
Yeah.
open door.
And that was it. You know.
Yeah, yeah.
It just kind of blows me away when it comes to that kind of thing. You know, that they could pull that much information from you just by doing those kind of things, you know. And during that time, these games were groundbreaking, but they only had a limited audience. You know what I'm saying? Like,
Well, mass adoption of computing wasn't really until the early 90s, I would say.
well, I mean, only those with like access um, to, because these were specialized systems. You know what I'm saying? They weren't like for the.
Well, no. In the 80s, people had access to 8-bit machines such as the BBCs and Commodores and Spectrums and Ataris and Lebs,
Well, you got
the
to.
Dragons.
Colossal Cave Adventures came out in 1976, so but
Yeah.
you know what I mean.
Yeah,
And this was
up
this.
to 1970, I would say 78. There was no such thing as a home computer.
Right.
Sure, there was dumb terminals.
Hmm.
So terminals that didn't have any software on them or any real hardware in them, and was all controlled by centralized servers. But the average home wouldn't have that
Right.
at the time.
And most people today wouldn't even understand what was taking place. Like for me, the whole thing that really sticks out is like only those with access to these specialized systems that could participate in these games. Okay, so that means like and I don't think that really has as much to do with the restrictions that were put on people with, or the limitations I should say, for
I'm
these
not so
computers.
sure because again, I go back to the BBS and as I said, it's like the Prestel video text systems where people could buy, could use modems and buy boxes to actually access remote servers.
That probably is what pissed off these governments, because they didn't like the idea that they had. And see, this is where I was going with this. Is like freaking, they didn't like the idea that freaking these people could go out and get this technology, hook it up to their phone, and bam, they had access to these.
So I was just reading Presto and Data, so video text systems. So the precursors to things like the teletext systems that the Europeans mainly were recognised in the 80s and 90s. Were actually in France especially was actually provided with French government backing.
Yeah. And see, this goes back to what I was saying about these government organizations. They were using college students to do research.
Mm.
Okay. You know, and like they had their freaking shit connected to this stuff. And then all of a sudden, you know, the home computer came into being, and all of a sudden everybody's going out buying all this stuff they could hook up to it, and bam, they're caught up.
Again, I wouldn't say everybody because
Well, not
again,
everybody, I
it's
know.
still it was still quite a niche market at the time in the 80s.
Well, you
Wasn't
had
until the web, then it wasn't until after 94, 95 that
well, I'll use the true slang for it. You
mm,
had to be a whiz kid. That's what we used to call them. They were the whiz kids.
okay,
Yeah,
okay.
the whiz kids, the ones that knew about computers and how to run them. You know what I mean? But these whiz kids could go out and just get this technology, hook it up to their computers. These cool new home computers that were just set up, and there were programs like this on this internet that was connected to freaking the government where they were doing experiments on college students, you know what I mean? And then all of a sudden they're getting hacked, you know?
You just remind me of something. I'll just find it.
It's a pretty interesting story when you look at all that.
You just remind me of the computer program, which was the first BBC, first British computer television series back in 1982. And in the first episode, it was only something like a 10 series, 10 episode series or something. But in the first episode, there was a interview with a owner of a British street candy store. And it was talking about how she was using computers to do accounts on and to send it to the bank and stuff. So yeah, so this sort of technology was around at the time, but again, very niche.
Very niche. Only those little weasels on computers that play video games freaking had access to your shit and was able to rip you off.
This particular story I'm thinking of, it was related to somebody that must have been in the 60s, 70s at the time.
Yeah.
Back in 1982.
Yeah.
No doubt she's well past Walter Coyle.
Now that we've gotten to this point, I think the best thing to do is go into the 1980s and talk about how it saw the emergence of proprietary networks such as CompuServe. Now, and CompuServe hosted games like Mega Wars and Cosme, or Kesme, I believe is what it is. But have you ever had any dealings with Mega War or Kesme?
No, at the time, well, we're talking about early 80s, so at the time I was not knowledgeable of these commercial companies except for Prestel.
Mm-hmm. So see, you don't know everything. No, boo-boo.
At the time, I say. But funny enough, when I started back in retail repairs, at the time of when the AOL was so popular that you used to get millions of discs given away for free, CompuServe was a big name because CompuServe was a competitor to AOL at the time.
It actually, its roots doesn't even start in computer technology because they were into like time sharing and remote access services and stuff of that nature, which like with remote access services, everybody connects that to computer systems, but that's not just about computer systems. You know what I mean? Like it goes back to like marketing for corporations and things of that nature, which a lot of like the first computer wasn't actually a computer. You know what I mean? It was like a computer was that technically a person that sat down and did exactly what computers today do.
Thinking, yeah, that's why I make a distinction between computers and dumb terminals.
Yeah. Well, them dumb terminals. Fuck them damn terminals. Now, but yeah, they actually had their roots in time sharing and things of that nature. So they went back, I believe it was all the way to the 1960s. CompuServe did. I know that much.
Yeah. Okay. I was going to say early 70s, but yeah, possibly 60s.
Now, I believe they also had the Radio Shack, I believe, which was in 1970s. It was in, I don't know if you've ever heard of that. They had a venture where they went into they went into things with Radio Shack, and I don't know. It was
yeah, in the UK or in Europe, I look at stuff would be branded under the Tandy brand.
Yeah, they actually well, Radio Shack isn't around now, so a lot of these new
Yeah, definitely not died. Actually, it only died about 10 odd years ago or something, isn't it?
Yeah, it was about a good 10.
That long ago.
Well over 10, I know that. It could have even been 20 years maybe, for all I know, to be honest with you. But they were CompuServe had a big deal with them, and I forgot exactly what the whole venture was about. I think it had something to do with after hours, you know, and
what?
well, like I was saying, that they were big on time sharing and remote access.
Okay, yeah.
So I know that. Now they opened it up, and what was it? It was called The Source. Now I know they had connections with them, and then they also had connections with H&R Block, which you probably haven't heard of, because that's an American company.
I think it rings a bell, but not completely familiar.
They're home and realty. They were involved in real estate and stuff like that. Well, I believe they're still around now. They do tax papers for people too here in the United States, so that they could do their taxes. But they did have a pretty long history, even before it came to gaming or any thing to do with computers, you know. Now, have you ever dealt with the game Mega Wars?
No, again, just sort of.
These are the kind of games that I'd really want to check into. Now it looks like you can still get, I guess maybe an updated version of it today. But it started in with CompuServe, and I know Mega Wars, from what I found out on it, it was a series of real-time online multiplayer space empire building games, which were hosted by CompuServe in the 1980s and lasted well into the 90s. Now, the original Mega...
Actually, it does ring...
Oh, go ahead.
Yeah, that does ring a bell. They played sort of similar sort of things, yeah.
Now, Deck Wars, the original Mega Wars 1 was a port of Deck War. It was originally developed by the University of Texas, at Austin. Now that would be where frickin' DARPA was experimenting with the universities, most likely to see how well people would perform in combat. You know what I mean?
Hmm.
So it was a multiplayer computer games. It was first written in 1978 at the University of Texas. That's Deck War, and no, for PDP 10 at Austin for PDP 10. It was developed for a lesser known 2-player version, War, just War, adding multi terminal support for between 1 and 10 players. Now, that's pretty interesting. So, they were developing multiplayer games in the universities back in the 70s, which I think I finally proved my point to you that it was feasible back then. It's just that it got knocked down because of the consoles.
Hmm.
You know what I mean? Like they were actually putting it together. Now the one thing that I didn't really take into consideration that these were only games that were available through the universities. You know what I'm saying? That's the one thing that I didn't catch on to. So. Now that Kesamai, I have no idea what that was. It's a pioneer game developers, an online game publisher. It was founded in 1981 by Kelton Finn and John Taylor. Now, if I believe correctly, or if I'm right, John Taylor was also involved with Pong, because I seen his name pop up on there whenever I was doing it.
Possibly. Possibly.
Now the company was best known for the combat fight Slim Air Warrior on the Genie online service. That was one of the first graphic MMOGs launched in 1987. So now we have MMOGs that go all the way back to 1987. What do you have to say about yourself?
One thing that strikes me is that for most residential domestic households, or most households, these sorts of things wouldn't be possible because most households would only have one telephone line.
Oh,
and
yeah.
obviously, would be used for purposes, and if you're sending down data connections, then those telephones are locked up. So if you are, let's say, a 16-year-old kid playing a game on or online, quote unquote, and your parents want to, I don't know, talk to their work colleague, you would have to get off the internet or get off the online service.
Well, you also have to realize too that was an issue. Like, and teenagers on the phone taking up space was always an issue. Like that goes all the way back to the invention of frickin' telephones. You know what I mean? It was like, I think older people's biggest blessings, in their opinions, was when the frickin' mobile phone was actually invented. You know.
And also in a lot of US sort of apartments, there lots of those lines were used quite a lot. So if somebody, your next door neighbour was was calling somebody, you wouldn't be able to call somebody else at the same time.
Right. Now, do you remember roguelike? Do you remember roguelike? It's like it was a style of role-playing game.
Okay.
Especially when it comes to like a dungeon crawling playthrough like game back in those days, but they used to call it roguelike. And that's
I see. Yeah, I understand where you're coming from there.
Now that's the one thing that really stuck out to me when it comes to a lot of these games, because like a lot of people, when they get on games, they don't understand that like people like that shit. You know what I mean? Like that was like a almost a cult following kind of thing. You know what I mean? When they
Those these days we call it a dungeon crawling CRPG.
well, I mean,
Crawling RPG, yeah.
well, roguelike was like more of a pseudo graphics. You know what I'm saying? Um, that was the weird part about it. Like whenever you had the little arrows that went across, and then like the little
Okay.
dots and
Yeah, yeah.
everything that represented the room, and like you had this little stick figure that represented you, and you had to walk through these freaking dungeons. You know what I mean?
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
So that's kind of
Very
what I
various games like that, yeah.
and I liked them. Don't get me wrong, but there was a lot of them that was annoying as shit, dude. Like they had, you went through a portal and you ended up in the wrong place, and then freaking you had to figure out how to get back to that place, and I think that's what Pokemon was trying to do in the first Pokemon games when they did the little mazes and stuff where you had to get to the person you had to fight.
I don't know. I've never been a fan of the Pokemon sort of. I'm a bit too old, maybe.
Well, I was a bit too old for Pokemon too, but I was kind of educated on it because of the Drew Gamer and Rapid Glitch. Rapid was the first one to get me to actually play it, and I was hesitant because I mentioned it to you before about my nephews and them. They masturbate to freaking Pokemon, dude. You know what I mean? So. I'm like, I am not freaking playing that game, dude. I am not doing it. And then finally, Rapid talked me into doing a Nuzlocke, and then I actually did like it. So I that
I
that
mean, the entire Pokemon thing didn't become a thing until what, 87, 88?
yeah.
Until the late 80s.
Hmm.
So, yeah, was, yeah, I was pretty.
Pretty.
Yeah, I was one age demographic,
Yeah.
I think. Yeah.
But I think that's probably where they were coming from. They wanted to kind of keep that going from the older gaming and stuff like that.
Mm.
Now that John R. Taylor the third, he's an American computer game designer. He's serial entrepreneur and massive multiplayer online gamer pioneer. He is a co-founder of the game company Kesmai, which they founded in 1981. And in 2011, Tyler was awarded the Online Game Legend, awarded by the Computer Game Development something something something. But that was the guy that I mentioned earlier. That sounded pretty familiar. So we've covered those now. Now I think the best thing that we can do is, well, first, I wanted to point out that these are early online experiences, that are in gaming, and they were like the first concept of competition when it comes to cooperative playing over networks. You know what I mean? Now, you mentioned about people were hindered by slow dial-up speeds and stuff like that, and the high cost and stuff. So I think we've got all of that covered. I think the thing we need to do now is talk about the console gaming's golden age, and that would be when Atari and the console.
Actually, I disagree with you on that because if you say the golden age, then we're talking about
The 1980s.
the late 80s. We're talking about the introduction of things like the Nintendo Entertainment System.
Well, you can have your opinions, and we'll leave it at that.
Okay. Enough.
Is that cool? We'll talk about Atari and the console boom.
Okay.
That's where the golden age is, man. That's where the golden age is.
Okay, if you insist, I disagree with you on that point.
Now, I'll give you the fact that yeah, the internet gaming was basically, well, Niskan or Niskan or however you want to say that. I can say that is true. It was very few people who had access to the internet games.
Well, online. Let's call them online games
Yeah,
to
online.
be rather than internet.
Yeah, I can agree with that. But consoles exploded. You know what I mean? And it was their popularity just went out of control. And this happened right around when Atari's home systems, particularly the Atari 2600, which you said you
Okay.
had. Tan even said he had, and I remember having it. So
I personally didn't have one at the time. I remember a friend of mine.
you went over to his house to play his game, though, didn't you?
Yeah.
Yeah. See. Yeah. We know.
At the time around that period, it was more Commodore 64s for me.
Yeah. We knew people like you. We knew people like you. You knew somebody had an Atari 2600, and you're like, man, I've got to hang out with that dude. I did it.
No.
Yeah, you're
I
breaking.
I know because of that.
I did it too, man. Everybody did it. It's like when you heard of the Atari 2600, you had to freaking play it. You know what I mean? And it was only Pong and shit like that. You know what I mean? It was like nothing really crazy, amazing and stuff. But back then it was. You know what I mean? It was like that was the time when computers first came around. So I mean,
And again, my family had a Commodore 64 at the time, and funny enough, that was the first machine. It was the machine that I took to myself. It's 8-bit Commodore assembly and basic.
so you're trying to tell me that while you were playing Meteoroid or Asteroid, you
No, I was
no, hold on,
writing code at the time.
let me let me finish. So while you're sitting there playing Asteroid, the thought didn't cross your mind as a kid. I heard about this game Pac-Man, and I heard about this game Pitfall. But it's on the Atari 2600, man, and I don't have this Atari 2600.
Actually, no, I was not familiar with Pac-Man until I saw it in the arcades several years later.
Well, that's another question that I gotta figure out too, because I don't know for sure which one came first, the arcade version of Pac-Man or was it the Atari version? Because
I think the arcade version. Most of these games did stem from the arcade versions.
hmm but you do remember Pitfall though, don't you?
Actually, no, I don't.
Pitfall was the one where you had to jump from vine to vine, and then you had to jump over the rocks to get.
I've played various sort of similar games. I can remember Commodore. Was it Commodore 64? Was it? I think yeah, Commodore 64 game or 8-bit machine game called Hunchback, which was a very similar sort of concept.
Hunchback.
Yeah, we played as the Hunchback of Notre Dame, but it was just really a sort of jumping over, sort of climbing up platformy type thing.
So you don't remember a game where you were on a vine and you were swinging back and forth, and there were like 3 little alligators in a freaking lake underneath you?
I seem to remember. You remember those Nintendo, those that range of Nintendo handheld machines back in the early 80s, the
Mhm.
Game and Watch machines.
Oh my goodness.
Um, yeah, those machines, which just had a single game on them. Still quite collective pieces these days. But yeah, those Game and Watch things, and I think they released one with that on.
Now, um, I, I could be wrong, but I'm probably not. I'm not quite sure. But do you remember Tomb Raiders?
Yeah. I was again a game I never, yeah, the franchise I was never a big fan of. But yeah, I am aware.
Now, Tomb Raiders would be probably uh, inspired because of this game. You know what I mean? It was really a cult classic, basically.
uh,
No, I like Pitfall better than I did Tomb Raiders because, like, with Tomb Raiders, if you fall down into a hole, you have to freaking go through a maze to get back to where you need to go to, and I found that really annoying when I did it.
mm.
But Pitfall was alright because you didn't have to do all that shit. Like, they had little ladders where you could climb down into a sub area, and
I suppose the most famous of that sort of genre must be something like Prince of Persia,
oh
the
god,
original Prince of Persia game.
don't get me started on Prince of Persia. My son wanted me to do the Prince of Persia games, and I remember like how horrible that game was for me when I was younger. And
Or what's the other one? Oh, what's a science fiction version? Wasn't there?
mm,
I
um,
can't remember what it's called now.
but yeah, like Prince of Persia was more of it was more of trying to get through booby traps and shit like that.
Mm.
And that was I did like going, or even when today when I play games, I love the booby traps. And a lot of people tell me I'm good at it, but I mean for me that was always the way it was in games. You were supposed to be good at getting through booby traps and solving riddles, you know, and stuff like that. But that's
Mm.
what the Prince of Persia was all about. So that was something that those were two things that I wanted to bring up. But before we run out of time, which I know we've been doing this for quite a long time, we've actually had some good conversations here. But let me
Mm.
let me finish up here because I know that we are almost there. And the reason why I say that is because here in the next episode, when I do it, I want to do the console wars, the, the big cool stuff. Okay.
Okay.
So
So things like the Sega versus Nintendo,
yes, the good
but
stuff.
the early 90s, late 80s, yeah.
But before we do that, I want to discuss freaking the crash of 1983, the gaming crash of 1983.
Again, as I pointed to you earlier, I consider it to be the crash of 82.
Okay. So
Just to be controversial.
now, what I was led to believe was it was basically like an oversaturation and declining
Mm.
game quality. All
Mm.
right. And being honest with you, I find it where today is got that going on in a lot of the gaming that's going on in our gaming in today's world. You know what I mean? But I personally can't see it happening like it did back
Well,
in
it's not.
80.
It wasn't just oversaturation. It was oversaturation, and like all boom and bustings. Too much money was just played in too much money played into too many promises.
Mm-hmm. Like
That
you,
can actually occurred.
like you have you ever heard the lore behind E.T., the game E.T.?
Oh, you mean the so-called pits in Nevada. The
Junkyard.
mountains of tapes and discs that are meant to be all buried in the desert.
Yeah, that's what
Yeah.
that's what this topic kind of reminds me of. Like it was so horrible that they freaking pulled all those games together and they took it to a a freaking land site and buried it in this land site. And like, don't get me wrong, E.T. was most definitely.
I'm not sure if that's actually a true story or if it's just a work of fiction.
I would love for it to be a true story. I really would. To be honest with you, I'd love it. But
Mind you, seeing as it was all magnetic tape or magnetic media at the time, it would, and all plastic, it all degraded by now anyway.
I mean, you don't want to play it. You understand that, right? Like you really don't want to play that game.
I actually have played E.T.
Yeah.
That version of E.T.
Do you want to play it again?
No. If I remember, I should have spent I think I actually spent more than 10, 15 minutes playing that.
It really was a bad game. I do have to admit, they were right. It was a horrible game. And when they pulled it off, and see, it wouldn't be a matter of wanting to play the game. It would be a matter of just saying that you owned it. You know what I mean? Even if everything didn't work in it and it wasn't all that great, you could say, "Look, I do have a copy of it." If you could just get your hands on it.
I wouldn't be surprised if you could find it on an abandoned website or archive.org or something now.
Well, I mean, abandonware, yeah, I understand. That's the program, but I'm talking about like the actual cartridge, like having the physical game, you know.
I have seen a tape. I've seen a cover tape, cassette tape cover of it.
That would actually be cool to know where it is, because
that was quite a few years ago now.
I mean that game has so much popularity in the lore that I doubt they would ever try to make a remake to it, ever. You know what I mean? Like it's gone down into the annals of gaming history, dude. Like. When
somebody should re-release it on using the original tape or disc images, and
I really don't think they should. I really don't think they should, to be honest with you, because like freaking I just recently played Michael Jackson's Thriller. Okay. And
with the game.
I'm
familiar with the.
I had a similar experience there. Like me and Rapid were going to do a series on retro games, so I was going to give Michael Jackson a shot. And I finally got maybe about halfway through the game, and I told him, I'm like, look, dude, I'm so fucking sick of this game. I hate it. I hate it to death. If we have to do any more episodes of this game, I'm going to freaking kill me. I'm going to go to Scotland, and I'm going to kill you too. And he said, no, Roger, no, Infamous. We can't be doing that. We'll stop playing this game now because it sucks horrible. You see, it was.
How many episodes did you do?
I pulled together, I think, 10 episodes maybe. And
how many hours?
I only did. I think I did half an hour for each episode.
Okay.
Which was too much by my standards. You know, I mean, that's still like 2.5 hours of gameplay of probably one of the worst games I've ever had to play in my life. And I'm not talking about like hard. I'm talking about like bad. You know, like really, really bad gameplay. So. And it was weird too because like Michael Jackson was going around saving little kids out of the freaking trunks of cars and shit.
God, that has aged well, wasn't it?
Yeah. Yeah. So you're like fucking sitting there thinking, dude, hold on, dude. This is just so wrong on so many levels. You know what I mean? And yeah, it was getting on my nerves real bad. So now the Nintendo NES. What do you have to say about that Nintendo Entertainment System?
If I remember rightly, we were talking about the what we were talking about specific chipset, weren't we, earlier?
Mm-hmm.
I mentioned that the CPU, the 6500 series, the most technology, or started out as most technology 6500. When we were talking about Atari, the Atari 2600, um, it was funny enough, the 6500 series was actually developed, was a British chipset, developed by developers that would become senior developers in Acorn Computers, so the people that created the BBC machine, going back to the educational thing that I was talking about earlier. And the 6500 is probably, in fact, I'm pretty sure was the first commercially available RISC based architecture.
Mm-hmm.
And if it arguably, if it wasn't for that chipset, then we wouldn't have any modern ARM devices. So we wouldn't have things like mobile phones, ARM-based mobile phones, or smartphones, or tablets, or the Mac M1 and M2 series, Apple Mac M1 and M2.
Yeah, I think.
And they all sprung from the 6500.
Yeah, and
Um,
yeah, you were talking about Atari 2600 in the chat, but
yeah,
yeah,
and weirdly enough, the 6500 chipset was the precursor to the Motorola 68000 series of chips that was used in a lot of machines during the early or late 80s, early 90s, including the Apple SE range, the Atari ST and STEs, and the Amigas. And yeah, if it wasn't for that sort of serious progression, there would, arguably there wouldn't be any ARM chips. ARM would not be a thing now, and yeah, smartphones wouldn't be as we would know them now.
you know, I mean that's kind of what I was talking about too. Like, and whenever you were talking about it going into your guys' education system, that's why I said that it would be good to bring this up, because there were people who are actually using these college students for research basically, and they
Well, for development,
yeah.
like I said, it was we Brits that, in reality, introduced these chipsets, and if it wasn't for us Brits,
Well,
you
I
wouldn't
mean,
have this.
you're just trying to be smug. I've been around you long enough to know what that's all about. That's that British we did it first kind of attitude. Thanks, Mark.
Indeed.
Had to pull it up and kick me in the teeth. Oh. Which, what you were saying there, it kind of goes back to the WMS. What I was mentioning too. Where they not only had a subsidiary here in North America, but it was in England. And these people were involved in like freaking military defense programs. I thought that was kind of cool. Well, not really kind of cool, but it was cool learning it. Like here in the United States, we had Sanders and Associates, and then the BAE. with them. No, BAE was the one that had affiliates here in North America and in England, and it wasn't the WMS.
Yeah.
So I that kind of loops back to that whenever you were talking about that, and like the technology we have today, which is going to set us up for the next episode or the next few episodes, because I want to go through the history of gaming and let people have a little bit of an adult conversation. Like I've been mentioning, this is all about adult conversations about gaming. You know what I mean? We're not going to play around and talk about like reward systems for playing Rapid, you know, or playing freaking Pokemon, or, you know, shit like that. We're going to talk about serious stuff and how it's actually like the technology from gaming, especially how it has affected the computers, the computer industry. Period. You know, it's had a big impact from a lot of things I've seen so far. So I want to kind of get into it, because eventually we'll make it up to cloud gaming again, and we'll cut it short on that one because I'm sick of talking about cloud gaming, to be honest with you.
And besides, we tried doing 3 episodes.
Yeah.
2 of them just
I think we've covered it pretty well. You know what I mean? So
yeah.
So next time we come on, you want to do it with me, and we'll be talking about the gaming wars, dude. Sega versus Nintendo, and the console wars begin, and that would be in the 1990s.
Okay, give me your notes a couple of days beforehand.
Okay, so that you can be better prepared.
Yeah.
Okay, so. Yeah, I'll hand them out. I had to pull this together because it's like I said. I mean, we've been talking about this forever. You know what I mean? So, so I think we need to. I think I started it out in the right direction with the right topics, because I say a lot of shit that gets you irritated, like about the hacking and about the government infiltration, how they're trying to freaking steal shit from our brains, and you know, and using DARPA to do it. Like, come on, dude. You know, when it comes to using the word DARPA and video games together, who in their right mind wouldn't frickin' do a stream like this? You know, I mean, I'm just saying, dude. I mean, you hear people talking videos about reverse engineering and alien technology, but when you hear DARPA with video games, it's like, oh, that just, oh, no. Oh, come on, dude. Seriously, what's wrong with you?
Yeah, funny that we do these sort of paranormal thing on Wednesdays, and we come to this now.
Yeah, it's like freaking DARPA was involved in the gaming world too. You know, it's amazing that nobody ever picked up on this and did a serious stream on it. You know, and that's what I love, because like we did the freaking history of VCRs, and I thought that was the greatest thing. You know. I did. I really did. So.
That's going to go down on. Yeah, that's going to be my sort of historical. There's going to be my memoirs. We did a video stream on VHS and Betamax.
Yeah. So now we've covered DARPA and the freaking internet gaming world, and we actually did it on a gaming stream. So. I've created history. So let's go ahead and end this, and we'll come back later, and we'll go deeper into the gaming wars and how it played out and stuff like that. Okay, Mark?
Yeah.
All right. So I will go ahead and end this, because we're at an hour and 45 or at 48 in recording, and we've reached the 2-hour limit. So I don't want. And before we go, you want to tell everybody where they can find you?
Okay, nice and simple. Say that again. Minds.com/Medworthy.
There you go. I was getting ready to say that until you called I'm glad you caught that. So, and I'm gaming with Infamous. You can catch me on Discord. I'm also on Skype. I stream on Rumble, X, and Odyssey, so you can catch me there. Now, if you want to find me on X, you have to find me by going to Rog LOL 1973. That's ROGLOL 1973 on X. I will talk to you guys later, and thank you, Mark, for being here. And we'll just go ahead and end this stuff, man, and be done with it. We got another week done finally. So, with that, I will stop the recording.